Hi everyone, and welcome to Living in a Digital World, How to Thrive Amongst the Chaos. And I'm so excited to be here today. My name's Veronica, and with my co-host Paulin, we are very excited to be talking all things tech-life balance today. So if you'd like to put in the chat where you're calling in from today, that would be awesome. But first and foremost, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land in which I meet on, and also Paulin meets on today, and would like to pay our respects to all elders past and present and future as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. So we'll just like to maybe give a little bit of an introduction into the two of us and share a little bit about our backgrounds and why we do the work that we do today. So I'll just kick off because I'm already talking. I'm a high performance coach. My background is law. I worked as a technology lawyer at Google and the largest global law firm Baker McKenzie. But the reason why I got into personal development was that 10 years ago, I had an accident where I broke my back in 6 places. And I was a university student at the time. I had literally zero skills to be able to handle something of that magnitude. And that's how I discovered personal development and self-growth, because I realized that it wasn't going to be my physical capacity that got me through the line like it did for many years of the all-nighters that I did at university. It was my mental capacity that would get me to where I needed to go. And the results that I was able to get in my life were nothing short of miraculous for somebody who'd had that sort of accident and the gravity of something like that in my life. So people started to see that and acknowledge that and ask for help, and that's sort of where my journey started in personal development and helping other people, and it's just grown from that, and I've been doing it for many years now. So thank you so much, and we're just adding people in as we go. Okay, awesome. And so I'll just pass over to Paulin to share a little bit about herself.
Thanks, Veronica. Likewise, I'm so excited to be here today and talk about this topic, which is very close to my heart. I'm Paulin. I'm the co-founder of Medu. We're a coaching technology startup. We're essentially building a co-pilot, an AI-powered co-pilot for coaches. I'm an engineer by background. Prior to this, I worked as an engineer at Canva and Atlassian. And my passion is really working on putting technology to use in accelerating inner growth and transformation. And I'm sure, like, as we cover the topics today, we'll also talk a little bit about why this is important. Why do we need to focus more on inner growth, and why does technology need to support that? And yeah, Veronica is a good friend, high performance coach, as well as our advisor. So we're very excited to be working together on this today.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much, Paulin, and thank you for everyone for joining us today. If you've got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat function, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. But this is going to be more conversational between Paulin and I. It's a culmination of all the conversations we've been having weekly for the last 6 months at least, for sure, and bringing all of that together for you today. So I'll just flick over to Paulin to start that conversation, and we can go from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Veronica. Yes, great to get started. So I think for the first topic or the first question that I think we should answer is, what does high performance really mean? And what does it look like to be a high performer? Could you perhaps kick us off with that?
Amazing. Yeah. And I think this is really interesting because it's so unique to everybody. But basically, in my mind, and there was somebody that said this out there, so it's not an original idea, but performance means potential minus interference. And I think of somebody who's a high performer really understanding the interference that stops them from realizing their full potential. And I think it's really important for somebody to work on their emotional and mental fitness, as you would with your physical fitness, in order to sort of self-regulate those interferences that you have in order to perform. And at the same time, because you've removed those interferences, understanding your true potential, and then understanding the ways that you can really fully utilize that. So I think the old paradigm of high performance was I can work for 20 hours a day and get 4 hours sleep 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And I don't think that that's the current understanding of what it really means to have high performance. And I think that's really where, high performance is distinguished from something like peak performance, where you're peaking and then you're like got a trough. So I think there's so much nuance, but basically really understanding your full potential and having nothing in the way of getting you there.
Oh, that's such an interesting way of describing high performance. And I don't think I've heard that before, actually. I think, like, for me, I believe that human potential is unlimited, it's infinite. So if we were able to remove interference, I wonder if our performance can be infinite as well. But speaking of interference and technology, what are your thoughts on the impact of technology on high performance? What both sides of the coin of how technology can support it as well as take away from it?
Yeah, I love this question, because I think that I think there's a huge paradox when it comes to technology, because it is a democratizer. It can completely transform our lives. Like, we can, as Paulin and I do, have companies where we can work from anywhere, and that's the power of performance. But the downside is that the technology that we're seeing is designed to keep us addicted and hooked to it. And that's not necessarily a slight against those technology companies, but it is just the way that it works. And so I think now we're realizing that technology technology has a correlation with something called dopamine addiction. And what we're finding is that there's no longer just substance abuse addictions like, drugs or alcohol. There's also behavioral addictions like, being addicted to the dopamine that you get using certain things like technology. And I think that obviously has significant impacts on our brain and the ways that our neuroscience sort of works and operates. So I think that there's a lot of different things that are happening from a biological perspective when we're on our devices all the time, in terms of like how our brain operates, but also just basic things that we did not have 2,000 years ago that are impacting us now. And what I think is really fascinating is that technology has evolved at a rate beyond our wildest dreams. What they're saying is 100 years ago, our knowledge would double every 100 years or something like that. But now our knowledge is doubling every 12 hours, I heard somewhere. So I think that's basically like everything that we know is doubling in that period of time. And I think that amount of information is such a huge load on our brains and our bodies and our physiology that we haven't really catered for, because our brains haven't evolved as much. So technology can definitely help alleviate some of that stress and that pressure by, for example, having second brains and having places where we can store all of this information very easily. But at the same time, there's certainly things which impact performance at a significant level.
Yeah, I think everyone can relate to what you described about technology being so addictive. And even where it's very well intentioned and created with great intentions, it can still have negative effects that are hard to that create patterns that are hard to break out of. And I think, like, for me, it's also interesting to explore how and if technology can help in assisting high performance. So for instance, with Medu, that's one of the things that we want to really make sure that we get right as possible, that it's not taking your attention, it's not just pulling away your attention, but it's really giving back to you, and it's really giving you more capacity and accelerating the process of inner growth. And I think like what you said, the knowledge is exponentially increasing, complexity is exponentially increasing. And that's why I think it's important that we talk about inner capacity, inner growth, and high performance, and the role of technology now, because the demands being placed on each individual are also exponentially increasing. And we're seeing in the data that people are struggling to cope with that collectively. So with that context, perhaps we could dive a bit deeper into some tools that help with high performance. What are, some very practical tools and techniques that people can start trying out to unlock high performance?
Oh, that's such a great question. So I think it's multifaceted and multi-layered. So I think the first thing is, I think we need to sort of think about high performance in the same way we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And there's certainly some things that we as individual humans now have been unequivocally shown to absolutely need that we might not have thought about in even a decade ago. So I think the bare foundations, and then you can build on those things, but the bare foundations that all humans need to really do in order to actually get to that extra level and remove that interference are as follows. So sleep is a minimum. A lot of people say, every between 7 to 8 hours. That is like a bare minimum if you're healthy and well. So if you've got any like chronic health conditions, if you've got anything sort of happening, if you're a child that's growing or something like that, then you need more, and especially women need more. So women often need at least 8.5 to 9 hours, possibly up to even 12, just by virtue of the biology. So I think that's definitely something that's not really spoken about. I mean, a lot of people now see the value of sleep, but it's definitely one of those domino effects to be able to get you to perform at the highest level, because your brain just needs that. The second thing that we're really seeing in the neuroscience literature that's coming out is light exposure. So that's morning light and evening light. So, exposing your eyes to sunlight first thing in the morning is crucial for your mental health, because it regulates your circadian rhythm, and then also being conscious of your evening light. So artificial light at night is not so great because it impacts your circadian rhythm, like a lot of people know. Mindful movement is really important. That doesn't necessarily mean, going to over exercise, but just mindful movement daily is something that I think everybody needs to do. I would say also women, if you are of menstruating age or you're still menstruating, understanding your cycle, because that hormonal balance and that regulation is really important to get right when it comes to your own mental health and high performance. I would say there's also quality nutrition. So there's always all these different ways of being able to, really nourish yourself. There's different, definitely a lot of different ways to do that, but understanding your body and what your body needs for quality nutrition is really important. I would say also stress control, which is something that I work on a lot in my practice, because when you are stressed, you're in the fight or flight response. And what that means is that you're in your reptilian brain, which means that you can't actually access your prefrontal cortex, where you will actually get the results that you really, really want. So that's why stress control is so important, and healthy relationships. I would also say that that's sort of like basic for mental health. And then for like peak performance, really understanding the inner work and the inner narrative, I think is just that extra percentage that you need to get to be able to have, mental fitness. And so I think that there's so many different ways that you can get those, get to that extra edge, but to even get to the starting line, those are the sorts of things that I think you really need to actually do every single day.
Yeah, thanks, Veronica. That's such a comprehensive summary of the different aspects of mental health and wellness, and then high performance as a step beyond that. For me, I think the 7 or 8 dimensions of wellness was a really great way to think about wellness and high performance, and you've covered those there really well. So that's really great to hear and reinforce. I guess, looking at it as somebody, for instance, who is taking their first steps into this journey towards wellness and high performance, this is quite a lot. 7 or 8 dimensions are quite a lot to think about and to do and to cover. So how would you suggest that someone who's taking their first steps into this, how do you start? What are some important elements to remember when you start your journey?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think understanding the biggest lever. So what is going to be the thing that's going to get you the most impact? And I would say out of that list, probably sleep and nutrition is the thing to get right, because if you're sleep deprived, you're not going to want to exercise. You're not going to want to do your inner work. you won't want to get out of bed. So I'd say like figuring out for you specifically, what's that needle mover? What's that one or two things that you can do that will just really make an impact? So if you, for example, I'd say the easiest thing is probably sleep, just going to bed at a consistent time, getting up at a consistent time, really being conscious of the, like what you're doing in that hour before you go to bed is pretty easy. Whereas something like going to overhaul my entire nutritional diet is just so overwhelming. So I think just doing something like small is really important, because what we are seeing in terms of people being able to actually execute on the goals that they set for themselves is it's not actually the goal that they set, it's the process that they set. So if you're overwhelmed by any of that, it's sort of just like, what's that one small thing that you can do every single day without fail that allows you to build on it? So again, to use the example of sleep, maybe that one small thing that you can do for sleep is, for example, turn off your computer an hour before bed, so you're not getting blue light exposure, and then picking up a book or something like that. And that's what you do every single day. So I think the process is way more important than the actual, more important than anything else. Or to use another really easy example, exercise. So if you don't exercise, the best way to start exercising isn't to go out and do a marathon. It is to actually go out and walk for 5 minutes, because you become the type of person that becomes a walker if you do it every 5 minutes, and it just becomes part of your habit. And then that becomes part of your identity, and then that's just becomes part of who you are. So I'll give a humbling experience. Like, I never exercised before the accident, ever. And then now I can't really go a day without doing it, because it is so much a part of my personality and my identity to get out, have a walk, have a swim, that it's just inconceivable to me that I would not exercise. So that's just because I did it every single day for many, 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 many years. So I think it's just sort of being kind and gentle with yourself and understanding what's those things that I can do without fail every single day.
Yeah, again, resonates so much with me and my experience as well of focusing on what is the one small thing you can change. And it doesn't even have to be a huge thing, right? For instance, for sleep, for me, just trying to understand, okay, what is causing me to not have good sleep? And I found out it was noise. Like, I was a light sleeper and I was waking up. So earplugs were a simple solution to really improve the quality of my sleep. And they don't cost that much, So I remember, we've had so many conversations on this. And in one of our conversations, you mentioned how these dimensions and the things and activities that you can do to unlock high performance are like a buffet, and you have all these different options. And the idea is that you choose the tools that work for you and you tailor them to work for you. So could you perhaps go into that a little bit more as well, and talk about the importance of intentionality and making conscious decisions, for instance, with the use of technology?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really, really, really great question. So I think for me, I think that high performance is a buffet, because we're all trying to get something different. Like, some of us, to use the buffet analogy, some of us want to go and grab a steak, some of us want to go grab some fish. Like, we're all so different because we all have such unique skills and capacities. And I think that that's really, really exciting. And so I think in terms of just finding what works for you, it's like, they say that the best type of exercise is the one that you're actually going to do. And so I think that's exactly the same thing. Like, the best type of any of this is the one that you're going to do on a consistent basis. And the way that they're understanding goal ascertainment now is that it's not like you setting this big hairy goal and then you being like, I want to get that goal. It's actually about you stepping into the type of person that would get that goal, if that makes sense. So if you want to be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, what is the type of thing that person would do? How would they act? How would they walk? How would they have interactions? What would their personal life be like? What would their professional life be like? And when I'm working with clients to understand for them how to get their quote unquote buffet or their goals, it's about, okay, well, what type of person would have that outcome? And then reverse engineer it and start acting like that. Because I think what's really interesting about humans is that we're really multifaceted. We have so many different identities. And this is something that I think is really exciting. Like, you like when you're a CEO of a company, you do not want to have that same like fierceness and velocity probably when you're at home with your family. Like you want to probably be a little bit more laid back, a little bit more chilled when you're at home versus like if you're, for example, in a boardroom. So I think when you're talking to people, especially people that are interested in this space, it's like you need to cultivate and create different identities for yourselves to be able to get to those goals. And I think that buffet analogy is really exciting because it's sort of just like that means that you can create the perfect meal for yourself if you are able to then understand what type of like meal or what type of goal that you want, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And what you said around thinking about what kind of person would this be, and then working towards that also, like, I think that way of thinking makes a lot of sense. And kind of pulling on that thread a little bit more, could you maybe talk a little bit about systems and processes, like setting up systems and processes versus just focusing on goals, and how that can help in that journey towards wellness and high performance?
Absolutely. So I think that's a great question. So James Clear, for example, talks about this in Atomic Habits, where it's like all these small, tiny habits that get you to the goal that you want to get to. And I think that's where systems and processes come into place. So to use the exercise analogy, if you have like, if your system is that by like you leave your running shoes like right by the door and you've got your like outfit already set up every single evening, that's a system that you can put in place. So for me, in my own personal practice, like I create systems by sending forms out to my clients in the morning and the evening, and we're tracking what's important to them. And in doing so, like they then become not only accountable to me, but to themselves about figuring out, hey, actually, these are the sorts of things that I need to do on a daily basis to do that. Like, and it could, now that to use the analogy of what we're talking about in terms of, technology and how we can use it for the better, like even using, like if you've got an Alexa or the Google equivalent, or something like that, and you set it so that at 9 o'clock it plays, it plays a piece of music for you that helps you wind down. Like those are things that you can put in place so that your system is like is really, really, really well structured. But I also say, as well as that, I would say use a habit that you do every single day and tack something onto it. So for example, if you're starting to say affirmations in the mirror, like you might want to do that when you're brushing your teeth, because everybody brushes their teeth, or most people brush their teeth, hopefully brush their teeth twice a day. And so you're looking at the mirror twice a day. So that might be a really great time for you to, say your affirmations or say the goals that you want, things like that. So I always try to get some people to tack it on to whatever they're already doing. And that's why, knowing the things that you do every single day helps to make those systems and processes work.
Yeah. I mean, those are such, like, you broke that down really well. I think about like how to think about creating those systems, and then how to think about using things that you already do and building on them, rather than trying to like sweep everything away and start from scratch and try to build everything up from scratch. I think a story would be super helpful here. And you work with a lot of clients, a lot of business leaders. So perhaps, obviously, without going into personal details, would you be able to share the story of clients who have worked with you and the transformation that they've seen, and what kind of high performance have they unlocked through that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I think of a client of mine, and I think when I start with all of my clients, we're trying to get, as I said, all of those Maslow hierarchy of needs, tech life balance sorted out initially, before we then go and explore all these other dimensions of their potential. And so for a client that I'm thinking of, we did just that. Like they had a specific goal in mind, but then by virtue of them reducing the adrenaline in their body and reducing that fight or flight, they actually realized it was very different to what they expected, because the outcome and the why that they were going for was actually quite different to the end, like to what they were doing. And so from that person, like they were able to really understand what their true meaning was, why they actually cared about what they were doing, and have completely transformed their business as a result of that. And I think that we're living in times when every single industry is being impacted by technology, for good or for bad. And I think when you're able to get yourself out of that fight or flight response, you're able to see more opportunities. And that definitely happened with this particular client whose industry was being so disrupted. But because he was able to have that self-regulation and then go into deeper states of mind, now that he wasn't stressed out, he was able to see different opportunities. And then now his business is doing way better than it was before, because he was just able to access a different level of mind, which I think is really exciting and a really great opportunity for all of us to go from that fear that we're all like, where most of us are experiencing in the everyday world, to, hey, actually, let's make it exciting. Let's find ways through this. So I think that's definitely an exciting journey that I've been on with him, to be able to find new opportunities in the chaos that we live in.
Yeah, that's such an incredible story, I think, of how that inner work, understanding yourself and creating more space within your own mind allows you to see things in a different light, and see things that were already there, but you're not noticing because you're in this fight or flight kind of stressed out mode, and puts you in that abundance mindset, which allows again, creates the space around you for things to work out and things to flourish. Um, Perhaps as one of the last kind of things to discuss, could you maybe talk about saboteurs, and how, like, does everyone have them? What do they look like, and how can you get past them and like unblock your way?
Sure, I'll just stop presenting as well. Okay, that might be better. Then we can put the slides back on in a bit. All right, cool. So everyone has saboteurs, all of us. No matter if you've had the best upbringing, if you've had the worst upbringing, we all have saboteurs. So that's that interference that I was talking to you about before. And it's this idea by a guy called Shemaine Shazade, who wrote about positive intelligence. And it's basically that there's 10 saboteurs out there of different varieties. But the main one for everybody is the judge. So it's judging yourself, judging others, and judging circumstances. And that is everyone on the planet. It's everyone. So that's when I think that's it doesn't only take up like crazy amounts of energy to be judging other people all the time, but it also really holds you back, because that's the voice in your head that says, who are you to do that? Or like, always do better, or like, that's not enough, that sort of thing. So that really comes down to the two human needs that we experience to be that we need to be safe, we need to be loved, and we need to be enough. Otherwise, from a biological perspective, we feel like we're going to be excluded from the tribe. And from a biological perspective, that puts us in fight or flight, because it means that if we're not part of the tribe, we would die, right? Like that's what it used to be like back in the day. But obviously now it's not. But that sense of needing to belong still remains. And so I think that really triggers a lot of the saboteur behavior, because we're continuously judging ourselves, figuring out where we're fitting into our own tribe and things like that. So I think the best way to and then there's, as I said before, 9 other saboteurs. And this is where it gets interesting, because it's different for different people. So you may find that you have a controller, you might have an avoider, you might have restless. There's all these different types of saboteurs. You can easily take the test online. But the way to first overcome that saboteur behavior is to first and foremost ask yourself, like, what's the voice that's happening in my head? Like, what's that internal narrative that is really stopping me from succeeding? What's that judge voice that is talking to me to say, hey, I can't do this? And it's different for everybody, no matter, as I said before, even if you've had the most privileged upbringing, or if you've had the most awful upbringing all life, like everybody has the same saboteurs in different capacities. So really, first of all, understanding the awareness of peace. Secondly, understanding, okay, well, if that's the voice, what am I going to substitute it out with? And then third, you can do I think this identity work that I was talking to you about before comes in. So I think saboteur work and inner narrative work is absolutely key to being able to understand what's happening in your own mind, and then evolve from that.
Yeah, awesome. 10 saboteurs. That's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, what? But like we
Um,
all like some people might have like 0.5 in one,
yes.
and some people might be really strong on others. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a mixed bag.
Yeah. Well, I would love to go even deeper into that topic, but I think just to like cover a few more different questions that we had, um, and slightly changing tack a little. Um, we've talked a lot about, high performance, and we've talked about how do you start that journey, the different dimensions of it, and um, what it could take to unlock wellness and high performance. I think it would be interesting to talk about the relevance of it in a broader sense, and why is it important that we talk about high performance today.
Mm.
um, yeah, and is it more relevant than it was before? Is it less relevant? So if you could share your thoughts on that, of the relevance of this topic. And yeah.
Yeah. First of all, I think it's like more relevant to talk about it today than ever before. So number one is, I think, so sort of first principles, technology is a democratizer. You can literally do anything you want from anywhere in the world if you've got an internet connection, right? And that's ultimate freedom, right? That is ultimate freedom for us as a human race. And I think that it's exciting and wonderful. However, as a result of that, you are now competing on a global scale. 50 years ago, you were competing against you and John Smith next door for the job down the road, right? Like, whereas now you're competing against the billions of people in the world because everyone has access to you. So I think in relation to that, we are going from a world where we are where a lot of us are employees and we've never looked back, my generations before us, to now everyone's an entrepreneur. Everyone can be an entrepreneur. People in my generation, people below me, generations below me, everybody seems to have a side hustle, or at least has some sort of idea about how to have some entrepreneurial ideas. It's not uncommon for everybody to have like some sort of business idea now. So I think that there's because we're operating on this global scale, because anything is possible, we have to figure out to ourselves, well, if anything's possible, what do I want? And I think that high performance and those skills and tools and techniques give you that opportunity to say, all right, what do I want and how am I actually going to be able to get there? Because the people that come to me, the type of person that says, I want this goal, I have no idea how I'm going to become that type of person that gets that. So it's up to me to figure out how you're going to go from this to this, right? There's that big jump without burning out. So I think that that's the other point as well. It's like, how do you be the best at what you want to do? And now you've got to compete with the whole world. How do you do it without burning out? And I think that that's a really exciting opportunity for all of us to sit back and say, hey, actually, how do we actually do this without burning out? So that's one part. And the other part is like equity and access to information. Like previously, a lot of industries were dominated by, cis white men. And I think that now that's not the case at all. And I think that personal development and self-growth can really be the lever for people that might not have had that same privilege to be able to access completely different worlds and access and overcome challenges that they might not have otherwise been able to overcome, whether that's socioeconomic, physical, mental, all those sorts of types of challenges. And I think that high performance is a gateway. Obviously, it doesn't remove all the incredible systemic challenges that we face in the world, but it gives you the opportunity to change your position and change the way that you're thinking about things, which I think is such an equalizer. And I think it's really exciting to see more diversity, especially in entrepreneurship circles, because of that reason as well. So I think that high performance can really help, as I said, be an equalizer, and that's why I think it's so important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that point around equity and the how working on yourself and working on high performance can be a leveler is a very potent point. And it resonates with me as well, my own experience. Perhaps one last topic to cover before, if anyone in the audience has questions, please feel free to pop that in the chat. One kind of last topic to cover, and then we can either go into Q&A or we can finish with the full body relaxation, which we love. So the final topic is, I think one of the things that we haven't really touched on yet in this conversation is the idea of support, right? It can be daunting, this whole discussion of high performance. How do you unlock that for yourself? What does it mean for yourself? What are the steps you need to take? It can be quite daunting. So what are some of the support systems available to people who are getting started on this journey or well into their journey? Obviously, like you being a coach, coaching is one of the great ways to support people in this journey. But would you be able to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like obviously coaching is a force amplifier. So I think that's probably just the best way to put coaching in relation to personal development. Like you can do it by yourself and there's no problem with doing that. It'll probably just take you 10 times longer, because when you've got somebody who's actively thinking about you and how you're going to perform and what's happening in your life, that just changes the game. So that's number one. I think friends and family are really important, and you know, they're showing in studies how important healthy relationships are, and I think that connection is so important to us as humans, and that's what I think is going to be really exciting as we develop all of these technologies. Like, how do we create communities? Because we're seeing mental health like significant on the rise. We're in a mental health crisis, and it's up to all these different types of modality, whether it's high performance coaching, psychology, psychiatry, or even just a variety of traditional techniques to be able to manage the types of stress that we see in our lives. Like, I think it's really important for us to maintain those friends and family connections. I think that even like nutritionally, you can do so much with your mental health. Like, and that's just wild, you know, changing stuff that you're eating to change your outcomes of your mental health is an exciting prospect, because that is something that you can do. Like, doesn't matter what your background has been, if you've had a shitty day, a great day, what you're putting in your mouth is changing your biochemistry. So I think that's really exciting. And I know that doesn't sound like a support system, but that's a support system you can give to yourself, in addition to finding like-minded people. So I think I think there's so many different exciting opportunities. And I think the best thing about technology is it makes it so accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, for having, you know, a coaching tech startup, it's kind of like this well-known, but still kind of a secret, that a lot of people in those high performance roles, whether that's business leaders, and obviously in sport, we see this a lot, right? It's not, they work with a support network. It's not one coach or two. They have a support network of people who help them to reach those levels of performance and exceed them. So I think one of the great things that we're seeing now is the dissipation of that, or like distribution of that across many different areas of life. And it's becoming a thing like that. People work with multiple coaches to help them in their journey towards figuring out their wellness and achieving high performance, whatever that means for them. Mm-hmm. So I think for us, that's personally very exciting, that that's a support network that can be accessed as well. Thank you so much, Veronica. I'm just gonna pause for a second and see if there are any audience questions, or if you want to cover any other topics or anything that we haven't touched on.
Yeah, whilst the audience are getting some questions in, I'm happy to touch on dopamine addiction in a little bit more detail, because I think that's something that is going to be really, 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 really important. I actually heard Meghan Markle talk about cars and the analogy between technology and cars, and I thought that was phenomenal, and I'll bring it into together, because she was saying, like, at the beginning of like when cars came out, they're really exciting, but you know, they'd crash and people would go onto the different side of the road, and you know, we just didn't understand the types of we didn't understand the dangers of the cars when we first got them. And I think that's the same with technology, and dopamine specifically is my broad stroke with that. And I think with dopamine, like now, as I was saying before, like it is being more and more considered a dopamine addiction. And I think that really impacts performance way more than we think. And so for me, the tools that you can use to sort of what they tend to do is neuroscientists say to take away the dopamine, and then that will help you figure out just how much you're addicted to it and then help you regulate that. So my challenge to everybody is to put your phone in a drawer for 24 or potentially even just 12 hours, because that will really help you build up your dopamine tolerance and also just get natural dopamine. So going out, meeting friends, gardening, doing natural things that give you high versus an artificial high that impacts your brain, I think is really exciting. Meditation really helps with that, because again, it's resetting the neural pathways in your brain. And then obviously getting a coach really, really helps with that too, because it really helps the dopamine loop. So I think having a very conscious understanding, even if you are jumping on Instagram and getting into that Instagram vortex that we've all been, or like LinkedIn vortex or Facebook vortex, whatever it is, understanding that that's fine, but taking that break so that you can understand that dopamine, I think is really good. So that's probably something I would say, but I know that we've got a question come in.
Yes, thanks, Veronica. The taking breaks, I think is like, I just want to reinforce that. I think that is so critical. And it's not that we're saying, don't do these things because they're bad. And it's that being conscious and saying, okay, I've gone too far on this, let me take a break from that and let me reset myself, whether that's through a mindfulness practice, putting your phone away, going into nature, getting some natural dopamine. Like, there are many ways, again, to do that. So that's such a great point to reinforce. And yes, we have a question. So the question is, you talked about tackling your performance in order, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I imagine some base issues like sleep are heavily influenced by higher issues, like in a narrative. Is that true? And what are your thoughts around the back and forth between those layers in the hierarchy?
Wow, what a great question. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. I think that if you've got a narrative in your head about, for example, sleep. So for example, if you have conditioned yourself time and time again that sleep is where you go to chill out and have fun, like, if you've got a TV in your bedroom or something like that, and it's like time for you to relax or have fun. It's different from, hey, sleep time is time that I rejuvenate myself. And I think that's really where your self-talk really has to come into place, and sort of inner parenting yourself. Like, if you're inner child, like if you're running around at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you've got to get up at 7 o'clock in the next day, that's actually, I would say, the opposite of self-love, because you are really putting yourself at a deficit there. And I think that there's a time when you have to say, okay, where's the origin of this bad habit? Like, for example, did I stay up every single night super late when I was a kid? And then I conditioned my body and my brain so that I don't like sleep, or whatever the case is. Okay, I'm going to acknowledge that. And then I'm actually going to, as I said before, become the type of person that's not going to do that anymore. So it's really uncomfortable the first couple of days to have a new habit. Like, that's just a fact. I won't sugarcoat that. But that's just because it's the ego in your mind. It's your story. It's the way that you've been operating for your whole life to be able to do this sort of thing. So I think reworking that narrative is really, really, really important. Because, yeah, I think that reworking why you feel that way, and then also realizing the end goal, where we as a species are motivated by pleasure 4 times to pain 1. So if you can, that's the ratio, 4 to 1. So if you're able to say, okay, the pleasure that I'm going to get by going to sleep, to use Allard's example, is I'm going to wake up refreshed. I'm going to feel great. I'm going to be able to do this. I'm going to be this type of partner to, my loved one, or, this type of family member, this type of employee or boss, then that's that 4 to 1 ratio. And I think that that's really exciting. And then also putting parameters around your vices, because we all have vices, whatever they happen to be. We all, especially in this day and age, have a lot of escapism. And so I think understanding that is really cool and crucial. So we as a species used to just want like sex and food. Like that's all we cared about, like, you know, procreating and having food. And now we can get both of those things very easily, you know, using technology. And so I think that we have all of these other vices to really compensate for that. And I think that's just natural. So understanding and being kind and gentle to yourself when you're navigating those base issues, I think is really important.
Yeah. Thank you, Veronica. That was such a great response. I do have a couple more questions for you, more of a personal sort of question, if you're happy to answer.
Absolutely.
The first is, like, you know, you mentioned, you know, how the injury was a hugely like chaotic transformational moment for you. How did you define what high performance meant for you after your recovery? And was it different to what it was before, or was it, pretty much the same?
That is such a good question. So before I had the accident, I defined success as like getting the best mark at my university and also being able to, let's be honest, like go out at the same time with my friends and things like that. And after you can't walk, none of that matters. Like it really doesn't. Like short-term marks that don't mean anything in the long, like, or going out and, you know, not feeling great the next day, for example, like mean nothing to you when you can't walk. What means something to you is, hey, actually, how am I going to create purpose and meaning from my life? Like, how am I actually going to show up? Like, how am I actually going to be the type of daughter, friend, loved one, person that is honoring the people that have supported me through this? And that really made me want to be a better person, because something that was so painful in that transformation was seeing others see me in pain, and that was horrible. So how do I become the best person so that I don't see my absolute loved ones see me in a horrific amount of pain? And that drove me. And then I was just like so curious, because the first time that it triggered in my mind that what I was thinking or I was doing impacted my results was I was at Google, and they had this thing called the anti-inflammatory diet author come on and talk to us. Like we had like a TED Talks for Googlers. Anyway, so she came on and she was talking about how certain foods you ate impacted your inflammation. And at that point, I was in chronic pain. I would wake up crying. I'd be going to bed crying. Like I couldn't move properly. It was horrific. And I was like, holy smoke balls, what I put in my mouth will change my inflammation level and therefore my chronic pain. And that changed the game for me. And so I think for me, high performance wasn't just about, you know, getting certain small like wins on the board in terms of like marks here or there. It became like, how do I show up for the people that I love, and how do I honor something like this in a really profound way, and be the very best that I can without all of these other interferences, and show what I'm capable of, even with the handicap that I might have. So yeah, it was, and then just like pushing yourself to be better every single day, I think is something that was really crucial for me. So yeah.
That's such an inspiring story. I'll never, ever get bored of hearing that any number of times. I think maybe one last one from me is, what are your day-to-day negotiables when it comes to setting yourself up for high performance? I know you've mentioned nutrition a few times, and I absolutely agree. I think changing my mindset around nutrition as well, it took me years, but when I've like made a lot of progress, I could tell the difference in my own everything, in my body and in everything. So if I am not wrong, that's probably one non-negotiable. But yeah, what are your day-to-day non-negotiables?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it's so funny you say nutrition. I think that's absolutely crucial. And to use me as an example, just so that you guys know how significant it is. Like when I was going through this process, and then I'd seen this thing on Google, once I realized that certain foods created inflammation, it was a huge game changer, because I took out gluten to test it, and then I put it back in. And every time I had it, I I would be crying within half an hour. Like the pain was out of control. And I was like, whoa. So it does actually make a huge difference. So I'd definitely say nutrition is non-negotiable. Sunlight is absolutely non-negotiable. Exercise. I speak to my coach daily, possibly sometimes multiple times a day, checking in with her and things like that. So her keeping me accountable is like a non-negotiable as well. Sleep. And I think that, I think connection with either myself or loved ones, I'm like always sending people messages saying I love you and things like that. So I think those are the types of non-negotiable for me. And always doing like some type of self-reflection, I think is really crucial and key. But yeah, I would say also most of the time I'm in the water, the ocean water, which I think really, really helps as well. And that's a non-negotiable when it's allowed to be a non-negotiable. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Veronica, for sharing those. And again, like you have covered in those non-negotiables, you've covered a good portion of those 7 to 8 dimensions of wellness. So again, like reinforcing that the way to think about wellness and high performance is in that multidimensional way, but also remembering that the different tools can be adapted to suit your needs. It's not like a cookie cutter approach that cutting out gluten may not work for everyone, for example.
Exactly.
So
Totally.
it's kind of like you have to figure out what kind of tools work for you and how to adapt those tools to work for you. So I think that's a good way to sort of wrap up my questions, but we still have a few more minutes left. So I'll pass it over to you to either do a full body relaxation or cover other topics. Up to you.
Oh, sure. So I'll just ask if there's anyone in the chat that has any questions. If you've got any questions in the chat, feel free. If you've got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm in your hands, you guys. I'm happy to do either way. But otherwise, I'm happy to just continue the conversation, or we're happy to do a full body relaxation, or even just describe what a full body relaxation is, which might be super helpful. And then I'm happy to send out a link so that people can do it in their own time as well. So I'm in your hands, but maybe if I just explain what a full body relaxation is and why it's so important, I think that might be a really great starting point in case there's any other questions that come through. So a full body relaxation is basically a progressive muscular relaxation. And what that means is it's basically you squeezing and releasing different muscles within your body, and then you can do you can do a countdown after that, because your subconscious mind relaxes with that countdown. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, for example. And what you're doing when you're relaxing your muscles is you are getting yourself out of fight or flight. And we are all in fight or flight unless you're like consciously working yourself out of it. So basically what that means, and this has been shown by Harvard scientists, it's created by a guy called Dr. Herbert Benson. And it's basically because you're squeezing and releasing, it's twofold. Number one, you're releasing the stress from that muscle, but two, you're also triggering yourself to remember when your muscle is tense and when it isn't tense. And so stress is first and foremost a physiological response. So I think that's really crucial to understand, because if it's a physiological response, it starts in your body before it like moves anywhere else, if that makes sense. And so if you're able to understand the trigger, whether that's for you, it might be a tight jaw, a tight neck, a tight shoulders, things like that. Once you get that trigger, you automatically know that you've gone into fight or flight, and then you need to do something to stop that immediately, whether that's going into the full body relaxation straight away or saying, hey, wait, stop, I'm going to get out of fight or flight and I'm going to just chill out. I'm going to regulate my nervous system through breathing, and then I'm going to do a full body relaxation after. It's the first thing I actually give to all of my clients. And once they ace it, that's when they're able to sort of progress onto more different techniques and skills and tools and things like that. So to give you an example, a real life example, and when it may or may not work, is I was swimming in the ocean down in Coogee, and I heard the shark alarm, and I was quite far away from the shore at the time. And if you're in the water and you hear a shark alarm, that's not fun. And I did not find that fun at the time. And I noticed, I noticed in my body that I was like super duper stressed, and I immediately jarred up. But then I realized, hey, actually, I'm in fight or flight because my muscles have like seized up. So I actually, not joking, I just released all of it. I saw the tension. I sort of just shaked it out, and I just casually, not slowly, but casually swam back to shore instead of like freaking out and swimming like at a million miles an hour, which would have then sent out signals in my body that I was fearful. So the other thing to that is stress is contagious. You can actually absorb it through your skin. So that's also like just another fun example of like it happens in everyday life that you get triggered even without you expecting to, but at what cost? So just, chilling out, figuring it out, then doing the full body relaxation. So it's really cool because even if you don't think it's working, it works. And that's why I love it as my major exercise that I give to people, because again, as I said, even if you don't think it's working because by virtue of you squeezing and releasing it, versus other types of closed eye exercises, for example, where a lot of the participants might be like, what are you doing? That's why full body relaxation is so effective. So I'm happy to give anybody a recording of that. I've got one that I'm happy to give out. So if that's you, we've got a feedback form after the call that you can just fill out, and I'll send it through to your email.
Thanks so much, Veronica. Like, what a great story as well. And again, like not a shark alarm, but I can totally relate to that as well. When you're especially in the water, and it's not like, your natural element. It's not like you can just run away from something. So you really have to have space in your mind to calmly respond to things. And I think that's topic that we can go very, very deep into, that responsiveness versus reactiveness, and how like full body relaxation, breath work, and all of this fit together to help you consciously put yourself in that responsive state. But I think to reinforce one of the really good points that you made, it's even when you think it's not working, it is working. The point is to do it. The point is the practice, not to get to some perfect state. The point is the practice, and that's something good to remember as well.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was incredible. So that kind of wraps up our conversation.
Sure.
And if you'd like to just let people know how to get in touch with you and us if they're interested to discuss more, hear more, come along to future events.
Sure. Well, the first thing is I'll just put in the chat the form to fill out. So, and you can also scan it if you're watching at home. You can scan this QR code, and it'll come up with a form. So you can just fill it out. Say if you liked it, you can put your email address in, and then I can send you the full body relaxation if you do so. Adding me on LinkedIn. My name is Veronica Mason. That's also another really great place to find me, and you can have all my updates there as well.
That's awesome. Thanks, Veronica.
That's awesome. But I might also flick to you as well. So would love to hear also from you, like where people can find you, and any other information you'd like to share.
Yes, absolutely. I think for me, the journey to starting Madhu and my interest in coaching and applying technology to coaching, as well as my interest in high performance and all of those elements and dimensions of wellness, has been a lot through my own personal experience, as well as working with coaches like yourself. So I feel very fortunate to work with so many coaches as part of my day-to-day. If anyone's interested in reaching out to me, that's my LinkedIn on the QR code there. Just send me a message on LinkedIn. If you're a coach and you're keen to get started with Madhu, you can go to www.medoo.life, and you can check us out there as well. Thanks so much for listening, watching, and joining. This has been such a fun conversation to have with you, Veronica. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Awesome.